But I gotta tell you that I'm still trying to process how and why the Prime Minister's office. I'm not sure he even signed anything. I thought it was a good idea to put Kim fucking Campbell in charge of anything, let alone in charge of a process to determine the next Supreme Court justice. I think she needs to immediately address the question that is on all of our minds. Is a courtroom a proper venue to discuss serious issues? Considering you don't think elections are. You know, I want to discuss all kinds of serious issues during the election. And I want to make sure that we don't discuss issues that aren't serious. We'll have to wait to see what the results are, but what terrible judgment. I mean, my hopes are... I don't have my hopes up. It's a very low bar. The Prime Minister's office recently appointed the person that approved this ad to pick the next Supreme Court Justice of Canada, and this is the infamous space ad. We don't need to have the history lesson here, but I mean, it was... why did Kim Campbell lose? There's this kind of narrative floating around in the back of Canadian political discourse, you know, in the back rooms of academia, that Kim Campbell lost due to her gender, and it's ridiculous. Okay, she lost because she was taking over from an exceedingly unpopular. The incumbent resigned due to mass popular opposition to his tax policies. He put down a very unpopular tax. I think he should have raised corporate taxes, but he raised consumption taxes. It was a tax shift as much as it was a tax boost. But I mean, it did help in the long run. The state had to increase revenue somehow. I don't think it was the right way to do it, but it worked. Either way, it was very, very, very unpopular. And then she goes out there and she says that, you know, we don't have to have serious issues during the election, and runs these terrible ads against her opponents. She lost because she was terrible. But, nonetheless, this election was probably calculated to appeal to female identity voters, ignoring the fact that she's a monster. And this is the Supreme Court, man. Like, this isn't some, you know, some committee somewhere. It's the fucking Supreme Court, and you're playing bullshit identity politics. You're stacking it with some fucking monster. It would be really great if they'd stop electioneering and start governing. Because the Supreme Court isn't the kind of thing you fuck around with like this, okay? It's not just bad judgment. It's also a real slap in the face, and it doesn't matter that they have a majority already, okay? Remember, Canada has a recall process. Sort of. We can remove sitting prime ministers through a vote of non-confidence if the party reacts that way. The Labour Party in Britain is trying to get rid of Jeremy Corbyn like this, right? Although he's not prime minister, but it's the same basic idea, right? We don't directly elect them, and the election is not in any way interpreted as a vote for a prime minister, either formally or informally. We don't vote for a head of... Well, the prime minister is in the head of state anyways, but we don't vote for that. We vote for the composition of a House of Parliament, and then they determine who the leader is. The truth is, the Liberals could remove Trudeau at any given point. We could wake up tomorrow when they're gone. And it's where he's gone. You don't even need to have an election. I think the most recent example of this was in Australia, and in fact, if you look up Australia, it's happened several times in the last couple of years. It's the Supreme Court. It's not some minor committee somewhere. It's a big deal on who it is that gets on the Supreme Court. We'll see what comes out of it, but if he appoints some bipartisan judge on personal recommendation from Kim fucking Campbell, I'd expect to hear a mutiny rumbling. If I was there, I would lead in the charge, man. Canada's greatest strength up to now has been its court. We have very liberal courts, and that's a good thing, because we're able to appoint the judges more or less at whim. Nowhere did he campaign on making it harder for Liberal prime ministers to continue to appoint Liberal judges. In fact, he won on a landslide. This came from nowhere. So not only is there no mandate for this, but it's directly opposite to his mandate. And totally out of right field. If you're on the political left, it is of the utmost importance that we retain control of the courts. I don't know where this idea of giving the courts away to a non-partisan process, which is the same as throwing it away to the corporate sector, comes from, but it really has to be stopped. I voted for the Liberals, and I want the Liberals to appoint a very, 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 very liberal judge. Damn it, it's not complicated. The existing selection process is not a problem, and it doesn't require a fix. Thankfully, I don't believe that what they're setting up is constitutional. The Constitution says that the Prime Minister has to pick the judge. It's his job. I mean, could you imagine somebody showing up to work and, setting up walking in to, the company that you work at and finding out that the boss has set up a committee to do his work for him? The Prime Minister has a job description. The job description is set forth in the Constitution, and a part of that job is picking the justices. So the court will strike it down. It's clearly unconstitutional. Somebody has to challenge it, they've got to go through the process, but I hope somebody does. Regardless, I mean, this is not the first thing like this that's come up. The Senate part was in the platform, okay, but I mean, it's he's already he's completely fucked up the Senate, okay? The Senate is broken beyond repair. And now he's gonna fuck up the Supreme Court. There's a lot of red flags going off here regarding the amount of just the way that he's fucking his father set up a very delicate system, and he's blowing it up. He's completely destroying his own father's legacy, okay? Why is he doing this? Well, okay. His father was a law professor. He was a constitutional expert. Widely regarded as a scoundrel, but certainly a scholar nonetheless, okay? And he set up a very delicate system. A very carefully designed system that could have only been set up by somebody with the background that he had. But Justin Trudeau has no meaningful academic background. None. He doesn't even have a meaningful bachelor's degree. He doesn't even have a meaningful 2-year college degree. He has no meaningful academic background at all. And he should know better than to think that he should be fucking around with the way the government operates like this. So I really think that the party has an obligation to step in and stop him from doing this. I mean, my vote was premised upon two things that I thought would be obvious. The first is that he knew his role was to campaign, not to govern, that he was an actor, and he knew he was an actor. And the second is that the party was in charge, because he was an actor. I'm not sure either of these assumptions are demonstrating themselves right now. There's a guy in the background, his name's Gerald Butts. If there's a party here, what happened to the party? The idea that the Liberal Party would have any reason to fuck with the court selection process that they've dominated for a century and have used to shape the country and their image is incoherent. It's done them nothing but good. The only reason he would be doing this is because he wants to one-up his father. He wants to have a bigger footprint than him. Which is this is a country here. This is not your personal fiefdom. You can't be allowed to fail, okay? If he wants to have this, battle of ego with his dead father, then he should step down immediately, go back to school, and run again in 20 years. When he has the background required to fuck with a country's constitution and fuck with the way that a country operates. As of right now, the premise is preposterous. The party cannot sit back and continue to entertain his absurd whims while he destroys the Senate, he fucks up the Supreme Court. What's next? I'm starting to think he's going to bring in mixed member proportional or something. He's going to bring in proportional representation. Yeah, that's done a lot of good in the places that it's been in. I just want to, it's not like H.W. and W. Bush. The biggest problem is trying to compare the elder Bush to the elder Trudeau when you make that comparison. Trudeau and W, if anything, W probably has more education. But the elder Bush, H.W. Bush, it cannot be fairly compared to Pierre Trudeau. Okay, it's more like John Adams and John Quincy Adams in the sense that Pierre Trudeau was so important in drafting the country's constitution. But John Quincy Adams was actually considered a good statesman. And if you want to understand, like, Pierre Trudeau wasn't just Thomas Jefferson. He wasn't just James Monroe. He wasn't just James Madison. He was Monroe and Madison and Jefferson and Adams put together. Canada doesn't really have a founding fathers, and, well, there were some females involved, but I mean, it's more like they have a founding father, right? Pierre Trudeau was all of them wrapped up into one. So, I mean, that's a lot more substantial than a one-term president, in the 20th century. And so I am kind of left wishing that Monroe or Madison or Jefferson had a well-meaning but ill-equipped son. Because if they did, then you could maybe kind of understand it a little bit. Because that is the right level of relative importance. In fact, it's less than, because he's all of them. So don't make the comparison between Trudeau and W. Okay, the elder Trudeau was far too important. You just can't get a proper understanding of what the Trudeau name means in Canada by trying to compare Justin to W. Okay? And so what's the problem with this? Well, let me be more explicit but terse. If you set up an independent, nonpartisan, quote-unquote body, then what is going to happen within minutes is that it is going to get captured by financial interests. This has been studied to death. You only do this if you're ignorant or you're corrupt. You're either not well enough read on the topic or you actually want the body to get captured. I suspect it's the former. I really don't. I don't think that if anything, I think he's too naive. He's too liberal in a colloquial sense, right? I think he really thinks that, setting up a body like this is going to have a positive effect, right? He's really just clueless. But there is no debate on the outcome. Okay, all independent bodies get captured. There are no exceptions. It's a failed policy approach. So when applied to a court selection process, this so-called independent body that he's setting up to prevent backroom deals, which, I mean, the Liberals have been accused of a lot of corrupt processes, but I've never heard of anything regarding the court. It can be nothing more or less than opening up the process to an open lobbying procedure in a way that is at arm's length from any accountable process. I almost want to throw Orwell at you again. Yet again. It fits like a glove. But like I say, I really don't think that's what this is. I really think that he's not corrupt so much as he's just a fool. Regardless what he's done here, okay, whether he realizes it or not, is he's put this seat up for sale. I really honestly think that he does think that he's doing something to make the process more accountable, and he doesn't understand that as soon as you get it outside of the process, as soon as you get it outside of the political oversight, then that's when the vultures come in. Okay, and that's when it goes to the highest bidder. And his father would have realized that and would have rejected anything of the sort, which is just my point. Why didn't he do it in the first place? It's not that he had some magical properties that the son could have inherited. He was just very educated and had the experience to see how things would logically unfold. That's something that when you read biographies of Trudeau, and I'm not old enough to remember him directly, but when you read biographies of him, it's something that's often pointed out is that he seemed to have a knack for being able to see how things would develop. And it was just logic, right? He was just very reasonable. And so when I say he would have seen that unfold, that's not just rhetoric. He would have. That was his strength from people that knew him. And he wouldn't have bought into that. Again, I think most people assumed that the party was in charge. Okay? Very few people would have voted for a 40-year-old drama teacher otherwise. Even considering how unpopular the incumbent was. Okay, this isn't an educated guy with no experience. This is an uneducated guy with no experience. Okay, this is not what anybody voted for. Broadly speaking, okay, every time you hear the terms bipartisan or nonpartisan, that is newspeak for unaccountability and corporate oligarchy. What it means is that the government is relinquishing control to capital. Because that's what bipartisan is. The only thing that everybody agrees on is that the banks write the checks. I really want to stress this, okay? As an individual, I think that Justin Trudeau means a lot of good. I just don't think he's equipped to do this, and he keeps fucking up because he's trying to do too much. He's trying to make too many changes. I really think that he needs to gain the wisdom to realize that the system that his dad set up was actually really good. And that what he should be doing right now is taking a step back and letting things function. Not trying to make all of these changes to a good system. I have never heard anybody criticize the court selection process ever. There's absolutely no reason for this at all. It's just fucking with something that's not broken. For no reason that I can come up with besides the satisfaction of his own ego. It's dangerous. And the party's got to find a way to, step in and put him in line. Functionally speaking, sir, you have a high school degree. You need to let other people make these decisions.